Imagine just for a second a world where that nagging fear about making ends meet just wasn't there.
A baseline, right? A safety net for everyone.
Exactly, a foundation. Now, picture paying for it by, well, significantly taxing the ultra-wealthy. It's a huge idea, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. A fundamental shift.
So here's the question for you, listening right now. If you had the power, if you could make that happen, guarantee that security for all by really hitting the fortunes of the few, would you do it? What's your honest gut feeling?
And it's important to think about what wealth really is. I mean, it's not just money in the bank, is it?
No, not at all.
It's the power to shape things, influence policy, open doors that are closed to most people. It's societal leverage, really.
Yeah, leverage is a good word.
So the question then becomes, if we seriously talk about redistributing that leverage, changing the very rules that let it concentrate so much, well, how do the people holding it now react?
Do they see it as like a fair adjustment or a genuine threat to their world? We talk so much about freedom, the freedom to get rich, to build things. But what about freedom from things, like crippling debt or just the constant stress of surviving? I remember hearing someone incredibly wealthy talk about how burdened they felt by it all. And then, you see someone with almost nothing give away their only warm thing on a cold night. Who's actually free in that picture? Who's less burdened?
That's a powerful contrast. And it touches on equality, doesn't it? That ideal we all sort of nod along to, a level playing field.
We say we want it.
But what happens when leveling that field feels like it might, I don't know, affect your climb, your kids' futures, maybe? Does that enthusiasm for equality take a hit when it gets personal?
Yeah, it's uncomfortable to really examine that in yourself, isn't it?
Very.
And look, this UBI discussion, it isn't just some abstract economic game. It's coming from real places, real anxieties.
Totally. People worrying about AI taking jobs, costs going up, just struggling.
It's about actual people facing real hardship. So, in that light, is taxing extreme wealth a practical fix, a necessary step? Or, well, could it just cause different problems?
And that's the crucial counterargument, right? What if hitting the super wealthy with big taxes really does slow down investment, innovation?
Yeah, what if?
Not necessarily because they're being spiteful, but just the incentives change. If that happens, if the economic engine kind of sputters, who's responsible?
Is it the investors pulling back or the system that changed the rules? High-stakes stuff.
Definitely.
It reminds me of this venture capitalist I talked to once.
Yes.
I built this from nothing. It's mine.
That feeling of ownership, it's intense.
Understandable on one level.
But then you think, okay, but what about everyone else involved? The workers? Maybe not paid great? The resources used? The roads, the laws, the whole system that let you build it? Was it really just you?
That idea of the solitary genius creator.
Yeah.
It often overlooks the context, the shoulders they stood on, so to speak.
Right. Which leads to fairness. We all have a sense of what's fair, or we think we do. Yeah, but is it a fixed principle? Or does our idea of fair kind of depend on where we're standing right now?
Exactly. If the system suddenly put you at a disadvantage, would fair still look the same to you? It's like a mirror, isn't it? Shows our biases. You know that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats? Sounds nice. Shared prosperity.
Classic line.
But what if the tide is rising so unevenly? It's basically just lifting the super yachts even higher and swamping the little boats.
Yeah.
Maybe then you need something to, manage the water flow. A dam, metaphorically.
A dam or some kind of redistribution mechanism. Because history does show, doesn't it, that huge wealth gaps often lead to, well, trouble, social unrest.
Yeah, when lots of people feel locked out, things can get tense.
So is this idea taxing the rich for UBI, is it a way to find balance, to ease those tensions peacefully? Or is it maybe a sign of something deeper, more radical bubbling up?
A demand for fundamental change, perhaps.
Could be.
Okay, let's get personal again. For you listening, forget theory for a moment. Think about your own money, your security. How much of that would you genuinely be okay contributing, not as charity, but systemically, to guarantee survival for someone else?
That's where the rubber meets the road, isn't it? Moving from abstract support to actual personal stake.
It really is.
And think about our own lives, our consumption. We might criticize big companies for how they operate.
Yeah, the profit motive above all else.
But our desire for cheap stuff, fast delivery, doesn't that kind of feed the very system we're critiquing?
Oof, yeah. Guilty as charged, probably.
So if UBI gets funded by taxing those companies' profits, Does that let us off the hook somehow, or are we still part of the engine driving it?
Does it absolve our complicity? Hmm, that's a tricky one. Okay, picture two possible futures. Future A, massive wealth at the top, lots of people struggling below.
The status quo, arguably, or worse.
Future B, maybe less potential for astronomical individual wealth, ambition perhaps capped a bit, but everyone has a basic guaranteed standard of living. Which world feels better, more sustainable?
It forces a choice about core values, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And you see these contrasts playing out, right? Billionaires racing to space while schools are falling apart.
Right. Is that just freedom of choice in action, people spending their money how they want?
Or is it a sign of massively skewed priorities?
Mm.
And importantly, who enables that? Are we enabling it?
Good question. What systems allow that kind of disparity?
Let's talk practicalities for a sec. Taxing the wealthy for UBI, does it kill the drive to innovate? Really?
That's the big fear, yeah. The incentive question.
What about pension funds? Lots of them are invested in the companies run by these wealthy individuals. Does that take a hit?
Potentially, yes. Ripple effects.
And capital flight. Do the rich just pack up their money and leave if taxes go way up?
That's always a risk governments consider with tax policy. How mobile is that capital?
These aren't small details. They have real-world consequences.
No, they're central to the feasibility. There's this real tension, isn't there? The pull towards fairness, basic needs for all, strong moral argument.
Definitely.
But also this worry, this legitimate concern perhaps, that messing with the wealth creation engine too much could backfire, hurt everyone in the long run.
Finding that balance, if it even exists, is incredibly difficult.
I knew someone who inherited a lot of money, and honestly, they described it almost like a curse. Constant pressure, weird relationship dynamics.
Yeah, you hear that sometimes. Not the problem most people have, but still.
So if UBI is funded partly by taxing fortunes like that, is it redistributing a burden? Or is it taking capital that could have been invested productively, maybe creating jobs?
Another angle. And what about personal responsibility? This is uncomfortable, but sometimes poverty is linked to choices people make.
It's a factor we can't ignore, even if it's sensitive.
So does the UBI accidentally weaken the incentive for, say, responsible financial decisions for some? And is that fair to people working hard, making sacrifices?
That fairness question cuts both ways, doesn't it? Fairness to those receiving, fairness to those contributing.
It really does. And you see the irony sometimes, right? People on expensive smartphones tweeting hashtag tax the rich.
Yeah. The device itself being a product of the global system they're critiquing.
Is it genuine conviction? Or is it, a bit of performance feeling good without changing our own consumption?
Hard to say from the outside, but it highlights the complexity. We're all embedded in this system.
Okay, time for more honesty. How has you personally benefited from the current setup, even indirectly?
Right.
What advantages have you had because of how things are?
Ooh, self-reflection time.
Yeah. And if you support taxing the rich for UBI, is that purely about justice? Or is there maybe a tiny part of you that wants absolution for being part of a system with inequality?
That's deep. The psychology behind policy support.
Think about philanthropists. I knew one. Huge donations, big public image.
The good billionaire trope.
Right. But the way workers were treated in their company, awful. So what's the net contribution there? The charity or the exploitation, how do we weigh that?
It complicates the narrative of giving back, certainly.
Now flip the lens completely. Imagine someone with way less than you, looking at your life, your car, your home, maybe your savings. Could your wealth look extreme to them?
Mm-hmm. It's all relative, isn't it?
So where do you draw the line for this kind of UBI tax? Who decides what's too much? What's the magic number?
And who gets the authority to set that number? A government. The people. Very tricky.
Focusing on taxing the rich for UBI. It seems practical, maybe. Works within the system we have.
A reformist approach, you could say.
But is it also, maybe,
Yeah.
the easier option, compared to asking really fundamental questions about how our whole economy is structured? Tinkering instead of overhauling.
Could be. Avoiding the deeper, more disruptive changes.
And history. Well, it has examples where big attempts to redistribute wealth didn't quite work out as planned. Unintended consequences.
Absolutely. Economic disruption, loss of freedom sometimes. We have to learn from those, right? Are we risking repeating mistakes?
Is this proposal different enough, or does it carry similar risks? Okay, here's a provocative one. Is it possible, just possible, that some of the push for this isn't just about justice?
You mean something else driving it?
Could there be an element of envy, resentment towards those who have way, way more? It's not comfortable to admit, but is it there?
That's the kind of underlying emotion that often gets ignored in polite policy debates. But yeah, it's potentially a factor for some. Nietzsche might have something to say about that.
So the question becomes, is the goal really to lift everyone up? Or is it also, partly, about bringing the top down a notch? We need to be honest about our own motives.
Self-awareness is key.
And we do tend to focus laser-like on the rich, their responsibilities, maybe their greed.
They're an easy target in some ways.
But does that let the rest of us off the hook? What about the broader system, our own choices within it that contribute to the inequality? Are we focusing too narrowly?
It's a systems problem, arguably, not just about a few individuals at the top.
So if you strip away all the economic jargon, the politics, what's the absolute core question here?
I think it comes down to, what do we owe each other as people, as a society?
Yeah, and the answers range from not much all the way to everything. That's the spectrum.
Okay, back to the potential downsides. If taxing the rich heavily does lead to less innovation, slower growth, who suffers then?
Whose well-being do we prioritize?
Yeah.
The principle of the UBI, or the risk of broader economic harm?
Tough call.
Really tough.
If this whole deep dive has got you thinking, maybe questioning things, good. Maybe share it with someone who seems absolutely certain, one way or the other.
A little productive doubt never hurt anyone.
What if UBI, funded this way, creates a society that's comfortable, yes, but also dependent, less driven?
The comfortable stagnation argument. Does security breed complacency?
Could it? Could ambition fade? Innovation slow down? Is that a risk we're willing to take for the sake of security for all? We seem stuck between accepting precarity for some or potentially stifling the very drive that created the wealth in the first place. It feels like a trap.
Maybe there's no perfect answer, just trade-offs. We talk about taxing wealth like it's a simple dial to turn.
Yeah, but maybe it's more like, I don't know, an organ transplant for the economy.
Ooh, interesting metaphor.
Yeah, you hope it takes, you hope it heals, but there's a real risk of rejection, massive unforeseen complications. The body politic might react badly.
Try this. Put yourself in the shoes of someone with immense wealth facing huge new taxes for UBI. What do they feel? Anger, betrayal, fairness.
Resentment, almost certainly for many. A feeling of being targeted.
Could you advocate for the policy, believe in its necessity, but also genuinely empathize with that feeling
Right.
without dismissing it?
That requires a high degree of, let's call it cognitive complexity, holding both perspectives.
Think about your own life, the little luxuries, the conveniences you take for granted. Are you willing to acknowledge that the system providing those might also be creating inequality elsewhere?
And is supporting UBI partly a way to ease the discomfort of that knowledge?
It's easy to talk about redistributing their wealth, the ultra-rich.
Much harder to talk about redistributing our own advantages, right? Our time, our comfort right now.
Exactly. Are you willing to do that personally, tangibly, today, without waiting for the government to make you?
That's a searching question.
Some philosophers, like Nietzsche, hinted that the drive for equality can sometimes come from a place of feeling, less than, resentment disguised as justice.
The psychology of fairness again. Are we leveling up or leveling down? What's the real impulse?
And where is the line between fair taxation and just taking stuff? Is it 70%, 90%? Who decides when enough is enough, when it becomes confiscation?
There's no objective answer to that. It becomes a political and ethical battleground.
And is this necessarily progressive? Could forcing radical wealth taxes for UBI actually create a different kind of dependency? Maybe on a super powerful state that controls all the resources.
A kind of neo-feudalism, some might argue. Dependence shifts from employers or markets to the state.
Maybe resistance to these taxes isn't just greed. Maybe it's tied to a really deep belief in ownership. The right to keep what you earned or built or risked things for, regardless of how much it is.
Is that belief fundamental to liberty? Or is it an obstacle to a more just society? Again, core tension.
And the idea of too much wealth. It's just so subjective, isn't it? One person's obscene fortune is another's just reward. Who gets to be the judge?
Nobody has the universal mandate for that.
I have to admit, there were times thinking about this where, yeah, the idea of the super rich losing some power felt appealing. I did check myself. Was it about equity or was it about knocking them down?
That kind of self-honesty is crucial for everyone in this debate. What are your real feelings driving your position?
There's also the cynical take, isn't there? That UBI funded by the rich is just social control.
Keep the masses quiet with bread and circuses, or well, bread and basic income, pacification, essentially.
Is that a possibility? A way to preserve the overall structure while seeming to address inequality?
It's critique worth considering. And what about the unspoken fear? The one people don't like to voice.
Which is,
That maybe, just maybe, guaranteeing security for everyone will lead to less striving, less excellence, a kind of societal mediocrity.
the fear that comfort kills ambition. It hangs in the air around UBI sometimes.
It connects to that feeling.
Thank you.
You ever feel annoyed when someone gets something you think they didn't really earn?
Yeah, that little twinge of resentment.
Scale that up to the whole economy. That feeling, often unacknowledged, is definitely part of the UBI conversation.
Maybe the truth is there is no objectively fair way to slice the pie. It's always about power, ideology, competing interests, not pure logic or morals.
Policy as a reflection of power dynamics. Often the case.
So maybe your role, listening to this, isn't to pick a side immediately. Maybe it's just to sit with the contradictions, the complexity. Maybe thoughtful confusion is the most honest place to be right now.
Accepting ambiguity isn't easy, but maybe necessary here.
If UBI happened via wealth taxes and life got more comfortable for many, but less dynamic overall, less innovation, could you live with that trade-off? More equal, but maybe less exciting.
That's a fundamental values question, security versus dynamism.
And let's be brutally honest with ourselves. Is there any part of supporting this that comes from, well, schadenfreude? A little satisfaction in seeing the mighty potentially brought lower?
If we're aiming for intellectual honesty, we have to at least ask ourselves that.
What about the absolute worst-case scenario? Radical wealth taxes trigger global instability, capital vanishes, economies crash, and poverty actually increases worldwide.
Could the road paved with good intentions lead there? It's a nightmare scenario, but one that skeptics raise. Does the potential benefit outweigh that catastrophic risk?
UBI is so often linked to dignity. Everyone deserves dignity.
Absolutely. But the question is, can dignity be given by a system through an income? Or does it have to come from agency, contribution, feeling needed, earning your way, however we define that?
Can a check provide dignity? Or just sustenance?
That's a profound question about human nature and society.
Years from now, when you think back on this debate, what core belief will really be driving your view about wealth, poverty, what we owe each other? What's really underneath it all for you?
Your fundamental anchor point?
Maybe the most radical thought is this. What if none of it is truly deserved? Neither the massive fortune nor the grinding poverty. What if it's mostly luck, circumstance systems?
The cosmic lottery idea.
Yeah. If you accept that premise, does it make radical redistribution seem more logical? Less about punishment or reward, more about just balancing the outcomes of chance.
That can be a difficult idea for people to embrace, especially in societies built on meritocracy.
Personally, I find myself torn. I see the vast unfairness, but I also value individual drive, the spark of creation that wealth accumulation sometimes represents. Holding both is hard.
It's the central conflict for many thoughtful people, I think.
We're all part of this system, right? Taxing the rich for UBI is one idea to change it. But maybe the deeper change required is us. Changing our own participation, our own consumption, our own assumptions.
Systemic change often requires personal transformation, too. They're linked.
Remember that first question. Would you flip the switch? The reality is you're flipping switches every day. What you buy, who you vote for, what you ignore.
UBI just makes the stakes of those choices feel much bigger, much more direct.
Ultimately, this whole debate about UBI, funded by taxing the super rich, it's not just economics, is it? It's like a giant mirror.
Reflecting back our values, our fears, our collective conscience, maybe our collective shadow.
And dealing with those reflections. That's the really hard part.
Yeah.
Much harder than arguing about tax rates.
Indeed. If this conversation has sparked something, maybe discomfort, maybe new questions, well, maybe listen again sometime. These complex issues often reveal more layers on reflection.
And if it made you question something you thought you knew for sure, consider sharing this deep dive, especially with someone who seems to have all the answers already. Maybe a little shared uncertainty is a good thing.
This has been The Deep Dive. We don't aim to give you the final word on UBI or wealth taxes. The goal is always to challenge your thinking, to make you question the ground your own beliefs stand on.